No, ma'am, this is not a good idea.
What's up, guys? Spenny. Breaking news, history made. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have just met in Alaska on an Air Force base, and the vibes are immaculate.
Miami Tower, Beechcraft Alpha Sierra, X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo, at runway 27 ready for departure to the west.
Beechcraft Alpha Sierra, X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo, wind calm departure to the west approved. Cleared for takeoff runway 27. Cleared to land runway 26 left American 1006 heavy number 3 for landing. Follow the Airbus A20N on final. Wind calm caution the Airbus A20N landing runway 26
The table
right.
was set
Clear to
perfectly.
land runway
Look at these
26 left.
beautiful F-22 Raptors. There, the
American
stage set
heavy number 4
for
for
Donald
landing.
Trump and Vladimir
Follow the
Putin
Airbus
here
A20N on
in
final.
foggy, chilly
Wind calm
Alaska.
caution the Airbus A20N
Get
landing runway
ready,
26
ladies and
right.
gentlemen. This is
Clear
the
to land
video
runway 26 left.
from the Air Force One windows
land
of
runway
all of
26
the
left,
military
number 3
jets
American 1144
awaiting
heavy.
an absolute show of
American
force and a
1144 heavy
power
number
move
4 for landing.
by the president.
Follow the Airbus
Get a load of
A20N on
this.
final.
F-22
Wind calm
Raptors and a
caution the Airbus
B-2
A20N
bomber
landing
flying
runway
into
26 right.
formation low
Clear to land runway
directly
26
over
left.
the head of Vladimir Putin
Clear to
as
land runway
he
26
arrives
left, number 3
standing
American
in
1006
shot.
heavy.
Look at this.
Clear to land runway 26 left number 4 American 1144 heavy. Southwest 29906 heavy, turn next taxiway.
Yes.
Clear to
You
land
can see the
runway
moment
26
Putin
left
like
number 4 American
Trump's still walking
1338
and he
heavy.
just stops and goes, what is that? Right? Here's another great angle. Check this out. So freaking awesome. I got to play it again.
Southwest 29906 heavy contact ground on 127.5. Tampa 4030 heavy number 4 for
Just
landing.
rules. Come
Follow
on.
the
If you're not
aircraft
like,
on
I am a
final.
proud American. If
Wind
this
calm
doesn't
caution the Airbus A20N landing runway 26 right. Clear to land runway 26
swell
left.
with pride.
Clear to land runway
It's the
26
Trump
left number 4
formation.
Tampa
It's
4030
incredible.
heavy.
Let's continue to watch the full and extended clips here.
Going to 127.5 Southwest 29906 heavy. American 1006 heavy exit runway when able. American 1006 heavy contact ground on 131.6. One 131.6 American 1006 heavy. Goodbye.
Don't sink.
Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo, continue for west departure.
Miami Tower Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo continue for west departure.
American 1338 heavy turn next taxiway. Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo leaving my airspace frequency change approved. American 674 heavy, follow the aircraft on final. Wind calm, clear to land runway 27. Clear to land runway 27 American 2135 heavy. American 2135 heavy number 3 for landing. Follow the Airbus A20N on final. Wind calm, clear to land runway 27. American 1338 heavy contact ground on 131.6.
Miami Tower Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo frequency change.
American 318 heavy number 3 for landing. Follow the air.
And the vibes are immaculate. A power move by Donald Trump shocked the Russian president. The table was set perfectly. Look at these beautiful F-22 Raptors. There, the stage set for Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin here in foggy, chilly Alaska. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. This is the video from the Air Force One windows of all of the military jets awaiting an absolute show of force and a power move by the president. Get a load of this. F-22 Raptors and a B-2 bomber flying in formation low directly over the head of Vladimir Putin as he arrives, standing in shock. Look at this.
Would this make you buy a Ridge wallet? 2 people could win a Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato, a Hennessy Velociraptor.
Yes. You can see the moment Putin like Trump's still walking and he just stops and goes, what is that? Right? Here's another great angle. Check this out. So freaking awesome. Yeah, I got the way. Yeah. There's the 2 men. And there's the flyer.
Delta 179er,
Just cool. Come on. If you're not like, I am a proud American, if this doesn't make your blood red, beating American hearts, swell with pride.
Delta 179er, heavy Airbus
The Trump formation is incredible. Let's continue to watch the full and extended clips here. So here they go. See the flying formation. Trump and Putin have some crosstalk. Some chatter. They stand there before the world. Man, Trump makes Putin look small. He stands like a full head above Putin.
Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine?
They shake hands.
President Putin, will you stop killing civilians?
Two seem to like each other. Putin says, I can't hear you. Or I speak Russian or something.
President Putin, how can the U.S. trust your words?
Look, just. And Donald Trump welcomes him into the beast. Amazing. That's wild. They both get into the beast together. Would you look at that? So there's Putin entering and Trump entering. Move away the press then. Just wild scenes. Exciting scenes. Look at this. Here's from a different angle. Fly over. Just awesome. just come on, man. Just be proud. Just proud to be an American. The Donald Trump alpha handshake as well. Trump doing the handshake. Pull him over. That's right. Nothing but alpha handshakes. Here's the side by side of the floor. That's the one.
Delta 179er, now heavy has the traffic.
And very impressed, the military man himself. There we go. Just
American 2054 heavy
the
has
online
the Airbus
reactions.
A20N in
This is
sight.
the photo of the flyover moments ago. Look at that. Yes.
Approach Envoy tree
Here's the
465
photo.
heavy is
There
next
you
approach
go.
in Miami.
The handshake of friendship.
Envoy tree 465 heavy, you are 10 miles west.
Trump.
Climb and maintain 5,000 feet. Expect ILS runway 27 approach via HND in transition.
Flyover.
Clear to HENDN.
Shock. Trump does the yank
Envoy tree
handshake.
465 heavy, climb and
Hold
maintain
Putin's
6,000
hand.
feet.
Voted for this. Fighter jets buzz Putin and Trump while walking the red carpet. Flyers. Oh yeah.
Climb
This
and
is
maintain
just so
6,000 feet.
awesome.
Expect ILS
Here's
runway
Putin.
27 approach via
In the
HND in
car with
transition.
Trump.
Clear to HND and Envoy
Enjoying
tree
himself.
465 heavy.
There you go. The historic handshake. The alpha handshake. Coming in. The B-2 stealth bomber, an epic show of American dominance. An absolute power move. Donald Trump, the king
Delta
of the power
179er, heavy
moves.
contact Miami.
This
Enter on
is a
123
power play with
775.
green line
Good day.
test. President Trump, pure green line dominance. Vladimir Putin leaning in. There you go. Photo from the ground. It's power.
Going to 123
It's power
decimal
politics. This is
775,
smash
Delta
mouth.
179er,
This
0
goes
heavy.
so hard. It does. It does. Donald Trump responding to Hillary Clinton saying that she will nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Did you see that Hillary Clinton yesterday said that if you got this deal done and not capitulate to Putin, that she would nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize?
If President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that was very nice. I may have to start liking her again.
Trump, Putin shake hands. Let's look at some of these pics. Yeah. Look at him. Look. Have you ever seen him smile like that? I've never seen him smile like that. Dude, I'm having a nice time. I think Putin does speak some broken English. Not often. I think they can communicate, you know what I mean? Okay. Man. Feeling when you're not invited. All right, here we go. This is the Anchorage meeting. The Anchorage Accords have begun. This is the photo, Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio. Some translators, and then Lavrov, Russian side. I don't know what this is. Putin became edgy the moment he heard jets flying over him. KGB training hasn't left at all. What a legend. Red carpet welcome for Putin in Alaska. Trump has surprise B-2 bombers flying overhead. Putin looks up completely surprised. Trump does the handshake yank. Go. The Trump power shake. Got it, baby. There it is. Wow. That's incredible. Just roll over. This one's for you, says Trump. Trump turns to Putin and says, this one's for you. That's great. What a beautiful shot, man.
I am obsessed with these. This is the Paleo Valley 100% grass-fed beef sticks. They're gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, corn-free.
What do you think Trump says here? Look at that. Look at this shot. Look at these two guys. Again, Trump's a lot taller than Putin. You know what I mean? There they are. At the summit. You love to see it. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Peace through strength. Nothing was said here, by the way. No. Gatekeeping at all. Nothing was said. Just a photo spray, they call it. Them getting photos taken. B-2 and U.S. fighters fly overhead. Trump and Putin walk. Sends a crystal clear signal. America is strong, capable, and in control. Is the kind of display that projects deterrence without firing a shot. power respected is power that keeps peace. Putin probably just said to himself, I wonder how soon before we capture one of those two. You don't ever want to hear this over your head again, do you, Vlad? Trump basically putting the FAFO on Vladimir Putin. Dan Scavino posting this sick video of the B-2 bomber. Ooh. Oh, it's just a thing of beauty. There it is. There it is. See Putin here looking at Trump. There are two translators beside them. Looks a little nervous. Love it. I love it. I love seeing peace through strength. This is what I voted for, ladies and gentlemen. An incredible moment in American history. A historic moment. And a moment of power. It's smash mouth power politics is all this is. This is Donald Trump setting the stage. Saying, I am in control. Patriots are in control. If you want Patriots in control, like, share, and subscribe to our channel, which will benefit.
you guys have ever watched my stream, you've probably noticed my dogs. Reptar, talk to him, buddy.
Danger alerts around every single corner. Choose your weapon to fight back.
Back to live now from Fox. We continue to wait for more key details coming from the summit in Alaska from President Trump and President Putin. I want to show you just some of the back and forth between President Trump and reporters on Air Force One as he was heading to Alaska.
Summit today. I can't tell you that. I don't know. It's there's nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do, but they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as will Zelensky. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing. You know, we're not putting up any money. We're making money. They're buying our weapons, and we're sending them to NATO, and NATO's sending us big, beautiful checks. But that, I don't care about that. I care about, it was a big factor when Biden spent $350 billion and got nothing. But what I do care about is they lost last week, 7,011 people were lost, almost all soldiers. 36 people in a town which got hit by a missile. But over 7,000 soldiers. It's crazy.
Could you describe a little bit, Mr. President, because I know you've had a lot of phone calls with President Putin. What's the difference in a face-to-face, in-person meeting?
Look, he's a smart guy, been doing it for a long time, but so have I. Been doing it for a long time. And here we are, we're president. That was much more difficult than what I'm doing today, believe me. So, we get along. There's a good respect level on both sides. And I think, you know, something's going to come of it. I noticed he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia. And that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled.
Are you going to talk about business?
Will you do business? We have the hottest country on earth. We have the hottest economy on earth. We have the hottest country. We just set a new stock market record again. We have hundreds of billions of dollars flowing in from tariffs. We're the hottest country. We were a dead country, like doornails, a dead country. 1 year ago, we were dead as a doornail, and now we have the hottest country. And he wants a piece of that because his country is not hot economically. In fact, it's the opposite. And China's not doing well economically, but look, I want everybody to do well. The war's got to stop and the killing's got to stop.
Mr. President, what do you stop? Thank you for coming back to take questions. We saw that Russia continued its violence into Ukraine last night, launching even more drones. What did you make of that?
I think they're trying to negotiate. He's trying to set a stage. I mean, in his mind, that helps him make a better deal. It actually hurts him. But in his mind, that helps him make a better deal if they can continue the killing. Maybe it's a part of the world. Maybe it's just his fabric, his genes, his genetics. But he thinks that makes him, gives him strength in negotiating. I think it hurts him, but I'll be talking to him about it later.
It's on the table for discussions today, Mr. President. Are the territorial swaps on the table? Will you be discussing that?
They'll be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table. And I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine. But he's not going to do it.
Mr. President, what did you mean?
Just one thing. What about the possibility of the United States providing security guarantees to Ukraine?
Maybe. Along with Europe and other countries. Not in the form of NATO, because that's not going to, you know, there are certain things that aren't going to happen. But, yeah, along with Europe, there's a possibility of that.
You mentioned the number of business people that President Putin is bringing along. Is that something that you want to discuss with President Putin at this meeting?
If we make progress, I would discuss it, because that's one of the things that they would like. They'd like to get a piece of what I built in terms of the economy. Just so you know, we were a dead country with our economy. He wouldn't be interested. He wouldn't have been interested a year ago with the Biden economy. But he is interested in the Trump economy because we're doing. Wait till you see when those factories start opening up. We have hundreds of factories all over the country, and that includes auto factories, AI factories, and every other. They're all coming in because they want to beat the tariffs. Because if they open here, they don't have to pay tariffs. If they don't open here, they have to pay, in some cases, 200%, 300%. I haven't even set some of the tariffs yet. I'll be setting tariffs next week and the week after on steel and on, I would say, chips. Chips and semiconductors we'll be setting sometime next week, week after.
What are you looking at? What rate?
I'm going to have a rate that is going to be lower at the beginning. Then that gives them a chance to come in and build, and very high after a certain period of time. And if they don't build here, they have to pay a very high tariff, which doesn't work, so they'll come and build.
Mr. President, hi. You had said earlier...
Is he over there? Isn't he a gentleman?
He is nice. He's helping me out.
He's a very nice, he's one of the few nice ones, actually.
You had said earlier this week that Putin would face severe consequences if you get the sense from him that he's not interested. What do you mean by that?
Economically severe, yes. It will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health, okay? I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this.
Trump speaking ahead of the summit there. We wanted to bring some of that to you here on Live Now from Fox. Coming up in moments, we'll have more insight and analysis on this summit and the remarks that we will hear soon from President Trump and Putin. We'll be back on Live Now from Fox in moments. Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page, pairing you up for the big in-demand joint news conference that we will all be seeing right here on Live Now from Fox between President Trump, President Putin, and the Pursuing Peace Summit out in Alaska. I want to show you just a little bit of the interview of Brett Baer had with President Trump on Air Force One heading to the summit.
I mean, is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
So when you talk about deals, it's all I do. My whole life I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want to, because you have to weave and bob. And you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning, this is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. Or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
Right, that was a little bit there from Brett Baer speaking to President Trump on Air Force One. Now I want to show you the latest from Rebecca Castor of Fox News.
And he's off. President Trump on his way to Anchorage, Alaska to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. His social media post this morning says it all. High stakes.
He wants to sit down and look the Russian president in the eye and see what progress can be made to move the ball forward to end this brutal war and to restore peace.
Speaking with reporters on Air Force One, the president sounds hopeful that Putin is ready to come to the table.
There's a good respect level on both sides, and I think, something's going to come of it. I notice he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia, and that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will not be part of today's discussions and says he's counting on America. If things go well, a second meeting with all three leaders could take place soon.
It's extraordinarily difficult to predict how things are ultimately going to turn out. There's no evidence that Vladimir Putin is interested in a ceasefire or a peace deal.
If Putin isn't ready for peace, Trump says there will be severe consequences.
Economically severe, yes, it will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health, okay? I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives.
Dividing up land will be a key sticking point to ending this war. President Trump says that will be discussed today, but Ukraine will ultimately have the final say on giving up territory. In Washington.
Rebecca Castor, thanks so much for that. We'll take another 2-minute break, and we will be back with more in moments. To Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks again for joining us as the summit is happening right now in Alaska. We are awaiting the big joint news conference between Trump and Putin that is expected to happen in the next 90 minutes or so. In the meantime, we want to continue to get more insight and analysis. And let's go out right now to the heart of the action out in Anchorage, Alaska. We find Niall Gardner with the Heritage Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us on Live Now. And again, wow, this is a huge, huge summit that is happening. President Trump, before leaving on Air Force One, said high stakes, and he meant it.
Well, it's great to be on the show today. Many thanks for having me. And as President Trump mentioned, this is indeed a very high-stakes summit, hugely important, historic in so many respects. And President Trump really is leading from a position of strength. He's the only figure in the world who can force Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. And I do think the president deserves great credit for his willingness to seek to bring an end to one of the most brutal wars that we've seen in many decades in Ukraine. Of course, this is a war that the Russians started. This is a war of aggression by Putin. And President Trump is sending a very clear message that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire and an end to the hostilities. And so that, I think, is very much the essence of what the president is telling his Russian counterpart today. End the war, save lives, bring about peace, and let's see an end to the bloodshed there.
And President Trump has said the goal really for this meeting is so that there will be another meeting soon, so they could get closer to winding down this war. What are the steps needed to make a second meeting possible?
Well, that's a very good question, and President Trump has made it very clear, of course, that the Ukrainians need a seat at the table for the next big summit. And of course, any kind of territorial discussions with regard to the future of Ukraine have to be decided between the Ukrainians and of course the Russians as well. And so this summit really is laying the groundwork for that. President Trump had a very successful meeting earlier this week by phone with European leaders and also with Zelensky as well. And I think that the message being sent by the White House is that more talks and discussions will be required. This meeting today is really laying the foundation for a peace settlement be put in place. But the Ukrainians, of course, will have to have a seat at that table. Zelensky will be intricately involved in any discussions about the future of Ukraine, and the president ruled out any discussion about territorial swaps in today's meeting.
And what have you seen out and about in Anchorage today leading up to the summit? I think a lot of people are out there and wondering, what the next steps are to this war.
Well, there have been some limited, protests on the streets of Anchorage. Not a large number of protesters, I have to say. But I do think that, just talking to ordinary people on the streets here, most Americans want to see peace in Ukraine and end to the war. And I think the silent majority are very supportive of what the president wants to do here. And the president is very serious, really, about saving large numbers of lives. That's a very noble goal and aim here. And I do think the president is emerging really as the world's peacemaker in chief in many respects. At the same time, as we saw with regard to the U.S. military action against Iran, the president is perfectly willing to use U.S. military power to defend vital U.S. national interests and national security. At the same time, the president is willing to invest every ounce of his energy in bringing about peace also at the same time. So this is a president who, like Ronald Reagan, is determined to deliver peace through strength. And President Trump, in huge contrast to Joe Biden previously, President Trump is able to actually deliver that. And I do think that Joe Biden was a very weak-kneed president, half asleep on the world stage. President Trump is a high-energy leader who wants to deliver real peace and deliver real results. And I hope that will be the outcome of today's meeting, but also the discussions that we're going to see in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The world definitely wants to see it. Ukraine will be listening in, and we all will be in about 90 minutes or so. Niall, great to speak with you out in Alaska today covering this. We appreciate it on Live Down from Fox.
My pleasure. Many thanks.
You take care. All right, everyone. In just moments, my colleague Andrew Kraft will be with you for the next several hours, getting you ready for the In-Demand Joint News Conference. In the meantime, I do want to take you out to Alaska here. It looks like a rally is going on for Ukraine. Let's listen in right now on Live Now.
Okay, Andrew Kraft here now in the anchor chair. Thank you so much to my colleague, Mike Page, as we've been preparing you for this momentous occasion. Let's step away from that shot. It's a little blurry there. A lot of demonstrators near the site of the summit. Inside the summit venue there, where the press conference between Trump and Putin will take place. That's kind of the main event here. As we are waiting. We're getting some reporting as to how the progress of the talks are going, at least on a timing front. We'll bring that to you. We've been relying on some of our Fox News colleagues there in Anchorage, including White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich. She had a lot of reporting on what some of these White House officials are telling us about the progress of the meeting. Remember, we're still told right now that it's the 3-on-3 meeting happening still. And then after that, there will be a wider lunch with more parties involved. And then after that will be this press conference here. So we are at the top of a new hour, 3 o'clock here in Phoenix, Arizona, 2 o'clock there in Anchorage, Alaska. So what we want to do right now, I want to come on camera and welcome all of you. Thank you for being with us. It has been quite a historic Friday already. We watched those incredible moments, those incredible scenes on the tarmac there at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage as Trump descended the staircase, as Putin descended the staircase, and they shook hands. And surprisingly, we saw those images live. Putin getting into the back of the Beast with the president there driving off to the summit venue. So not sure we anticipated that, but that was quite the moment there. In the meantime, though, we do want to stay in Anchorage, Alaska. We're going to bring in my friend to the conversation here, Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen. He's reporting there on scene, live. He joins me on scene and live as well. Connor, good to see you here. What is the energy like right now? Who are you speaking to? What are you hearing?
Hi, Andrew. Well, it's really just an air of anticipation as we get closer to 3 hours of this bilateral meeting. As you mentioned, just 3 people on each side from each delegation. And President Trump had been saying going into this that he's convinced Vladimir Putin is ready to make a deal on a ceasefire, but he was cautiously optimistic, saying he would be willing to just walk out if he sensed Putin was not ready to make a deal or did not agree. But so far, one would think some progress could be being made here before they head to this lunch and hopefully a joint press conference. President Trump coming face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska for the first time since the start of his second term. The two leaders greeted each other on the tarmac at Elmendorf Air Force Base before beginning a sit-down aimed at ending the war in Ukraine.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
President Trump says the goal of these talks is not to broker a peace deal on behalf of Kyiv, but instead to get Putin to the negotiating table.
I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing.
Ahead of the summit, the president said both sides will need to reach an agreement on territory before ending the war. Right now, Russia occupies nearly 1/5 of Ukraine's land and is pushing for more.
The war continues precisely because there's no order nor any intention that Moscow is preparing to end this war.
And if Putin does not make concessions soon, there could be severe economic consequences.
He really does want to avoid these tariffs and sanctions. And if the president dropped them, then that doesn't end the process.
And while Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was not invited to this summit, President Trump is hoping today will open the door to a meeting between all 3 of the leaders. He even suggested the possibility of that happening right here in Alaska. Andrew.
I mean, Connor, you can make the argument that the entire premise of this meeting is for Trump to convince Putin to meet with Zelensky. That's how it's being sold, right?
Exactly right, and some of those European leaders you've heard from over the past week have been hoping that would be the goal too. They could end up joining in on these talks if they happen. Now, it does seem that Vladimir Putin does want to talk about some other topics as well, bringing some top business leaders from Russia with them. We're told even as many as hundreds of people in this Russian delegation if they go into these expanded talks. So this could go beyond perhaps the ceasefire into some kind of economic discussions as well.
Connor, just lastly, too, we have a live picture inside the summit venue where the press conference will be held. Any idea how the press conference is going to go? How many questions might be posed to each Trump and Putin? Any idea on that front? How long it may last?
Well, Andrew, a lot of the planning on this, as you can imagine, came together rather quickly and is changing rather fluidly. The hope is that both leaders, both President Trump and President Putin, will walk out there together and speak, maybe even take some questions. There's a chance it could just be President Trump. He said he would do it either way, whether or not Putin wants to. So we're kind of just going to have to wait and see exactly how that goes down.
All right, Connor Hansen there live for us in Anchorage. Connor, we'll be checking in with you also after the press conference, and we'll talk then. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, in the meantime here, like I said, we're in a new hour. We have a lot in store, and this is shaping up to be quite a historic day. We have so many of our stable of experts and analysts waiting in the wings to help us make sense and position this moment, not only within the Trump administration, Trump's presidency, but in overall geopolitics. Will it do anything to bring about the end of the war in Ukraine, or will it just incrementally try to get diplomacy back on track here, try to get the parties in the room, Russia and Ukraine here? So that is kind of the task before President Trump. We'll see if he makes any progress. And he's been very forthcoming throughout the course of the day. He's been very transparent, acknowledging that if he notices in the first few minutes that it's going south or he's not going to achieve what he came there to achieve, that, and he told Red Bear this, that he will walk, and we'll see whether or not it comes to that. But in the meantime here, let's take our first commercial break of this hour. More analysis and expertise from Anchorage in 2 minutes. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. I'm going to be with you for the next 4 hours as we recount this historic day, and you're going to watch every minute of it live, raw, and uninterrupted. That's what we do here. You know that. In the meantime, though, take a look at this shot we have in Anchorage, Alaska at the moment. You can see there the unfurling of this just huge Ukrainian flag. Look at all of the people surrounding it. You see there's some of the signs saying Putin is a war criminal. These scenes are teeming with Ukrainian flags. Also, what has become somewhat of a symbol of the war effort of Ukraine, the sunflower. You've seen a lot of sunflowers over the last 24 hours. So it also does seem like there's some activity in this shot there inside of the press conference room where it's going to be taking place. You see there just those two words, pursuing peace. Simple enough, but quite the difficult task before President Trump. Also, in the meantime, the White House putting out this as well, a photo of Trump and Putin. I thought we just had that, we just had that. We can put that up in just a moment. Take a look at this, the White House releasing this photo. There you see President Trump and Vladimir Putin, their first face-to-face meeting since 2019. Remember, they met there in Osaka, Japan at the G20 summit. So in the meantime, here on Live Now, I want to bring in a familiar face to you by now. That's, of course, national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kempfer, not via Zoom, but in studio, in our Live Now studios. What a treat, Hal, especially for this momentous occasion. So let's get right to it. There's a lot to get to. I had posed the question to Connor Hansen that really the crux and the entire premise of the meeting, for Trump at least, is to convince Putin to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. I mean, if he leaves Anchorage and that's achieved, that would be quite the accomplishment. Could you make that argument?
I would say that really is the essence of the argument itself. That's the whole goal, is to set up a second meeting. Basically, he wants to have a trilateral meeting, which will be, you could say bilateral between Putin and Zelensky, but the reality is Trump is definitely going to be there. And there's also a lot of talk that some of the Europeans might be represented as well. So that is the goal. And actually, when I look at the entire thing, and I look at the certainly what appears to be initial rapport between Trump and Putin, I'm thinking that they might actually accomplish setting up a meeting. Although there's a very good chance that they could come out and it could be something rather vague, like, yes, at some point in the future we need to meet, and there's no definite timeline that comes out of that. And that's going to be a difficult one, because if he does that, that is a sign that Putin really isn't serious. That's a sign that should be a cue that Putin's actually just buying more time to avoid those secondary tariffs, to avoid more sanctions. So we'll see how that rolls out. But as you know, it's not a one-on-one meeting. They're actually doing 3-on-3 meetings. So there's a couple of other people in the room that can kind of whisper in President Trump's ear, you know, when those things are being said.
So, Hal, I just have to note this. There is now a flurry of activity in this room, and we're trying to see why. From what we understand right now, the parties are still meeting, but I'm not entirely sure who's in the room right now. But you see, presumably, a lot of the press corps on hand for the summit, I guess, gearing up. This just filled in this room quite rapidly in just the last 30 seconds here. Actually, we have a head-on shot. Let's take that. So I'm going to do my best to try to identify and point out some members of the Russian delegation, as will Hal Kempfer alongside us. We know all the members, obviously, of the U.S. delegation, but we don't have any sense of timing yet on the press conference. But boy, Hal, look at all the activity. You know, I was struck because, and you're a student of criminology, a lot of U.S.-Soviet summits and meetings, Hal, they spanned a weekend or 3 or 4 days. You know, I'm reminded of the Reykjavik summit between Reagan and Gorbachev. We can get into that. Not just kind of one day where you have to get everything in. That was kind of Soviet-U.S. summits of the past. This is very different, is it not?
This is really different, and frankly, it looks like they're getting ready for a press conference, which I can interpret one or two ways. Either Putin agreed to something, which he may have. He may have been prepared to make some grand gesture to say, yes, I will meet with President Zelensky at some point here in the future. I mean, they could literally come out, he could say, I have agreed to a ceasefire based on what the U.S. had basically placed on the table. I'm not holding my breath on that one, but it's possible that could happen. The other side of the reason they're having a press conference this early is because they may have hit loggerheads. They may have gone nowhere. And so they're saying, rather than belabor this thing, let's go out and do our joint press conference and say something nice about the future. And that could happen as well.
So, Hal, a lot of these meetings, it's about symbolism and showmanship. What have you seen throughout the course of the day that has been orchestrated to demonstrate that from the U.S. side? The first thing that struck out to me was the flyover right as Trump and Putin were shaking hands on the dais there on the tarmac. What was that meant to achieve, do you think?
Well, that was a clear message of American power. Look, that is something that Russia can't do. We have strategic capabilities they don't have. I mean, they're flying bombers that they built back in the 60s. Their stuff, they have some 60s and 70s, I should say. They have some really old bombers. And of course, one could say that it reminds Putin of how many bombers he lost when Ukraine did that covert operation with drones and took them out. I'm not going to read that much into it, but one could say that might cause a little bit of remembrance on Putin's part of how many bombers he lost in that Ukrainian operation. But I really think it was to show American might. And by the way, there were F-22s that were sitting there, air superiority fighters that were on the tarmac. All of this is to show the capabilities that the U.S. has. And we have some phenomenal aircraft. I would argue we don't have enough of them, but we do have some phenomenal aircraft. And of course, the B-2 just, was part of that raid that we just did in Iran, very successful raid where he took out those nuclear sites. So it is really kind of showing off America's strength, America's prowess, and trying to make an impression on the Russians of what America's capable of.
So, Hal, according to Jackie Heinrich, who's in the room with Vox, this was her reporting about an hour ago, that President Trump's 3-on-3 meeting with Putin continues. Rubio and Witkoff joining Trump on the U.S. side. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Foreign Affairs Advisor Yuri Yushakov joining Putin on the Russian side. A White House official confirming the working lunch with the expanded delegation has not started yet. Now, that was an hour ago, so presumably it could have started. But we just don't know. We have all of these live scenes. And to your point, Hal, it does seem like there is something happening. Reporters are preparing for it. We have different vantage points inside the room here. Yet another angle as well. Something that people are fixating on, Hal, this moment. We talk about symbolism. We talk about overtures. Putin getting into the beast with Trump after they met. How should we read that? That was somewhat unexpected.
That actually caught me by surprise. I didn't expect he was going to do that. A couple of things. First off, if you're in Ukraine and you see, Putin, who in their minds is an evil pariah, and has been a pariah on the international scene for, over 3 years, getting the red carpet treatment, that obviously has got to rankle more than a few out there. And he did. He got the red carpet treatment. But the other thing too is they're kind of watching this across this board, with President Trump getting in the beast, his limousine, the presidential limousine, with Putin one-on-one. Now, Putin doesn't like to speak English publicly. He prefers to use a translator when he's doing a speech or something. He just doesn't feel comfortable doing that. But in private, and sometimes in interviews and things, he will speak English, and he speaks English pretty well. I wouldn't say he's fluent, but it's definitely a clear Russian accent. Let's just put it that way. But I think they probably had an interesting conversation in the vehicle. And what's interesting is you got this 3-on-3, and the discussion was, well, they thought it was going to be a 1-on-1. Well, frankly, that was a one-on-one. When they were in the Beast, that was a one-on-one. Didn't last for a long time, but it was a one-on-one.
Okay. Yeah, Hal, I was going to ask you, how good is Putin's English? You elucidated that there. So according to Dan Scavino on social media about 20 minutes ago, he said the Trump-Putin 3-on-3 meeting is now at the 2.5-hour mark. Also, reporters on social media are saying there's been a flurry of activity. We've been seeing this in the room. You can see it there live. And that this could happen at any time, that it could be very, very imminent here. So I don't want to cut you off, but I might have to if I see the parties enter the room there. Let's talk about where Ukraine is in all of this. The Financial Times today says the feeling in Kyiv, Hal, is extremely tense. I would imagine they're watching this extremely closely. How do you think they're feeling in Kyiv right now?
They're nervous. They're hopeful, but nervous. You know, I think it's over 60% of the Ukrainian population would like to see this war end. And that's understandable. On the other side, though, is, as it's sometimes said, they don't want to see the third war break out. And you know, if you break out the different times Russia has invaded, the third war would be whatever comes after this. And what they're afraid of is that something could be put in place where there just aren't enough strategic guarantees that Russia won't reinvade, won't try to finish the job, so to speak. And that's what they're worried about, is that they could have a ceasefire or peace agreement where Russia is sitting there poised to go in and then try and take Kyiv again. And so they're nervous about what comes out of this. Now, President Trump has said he's not going to talk about swapping territory. He's not going to talk about trading land, if you will. And I'm just going to have to take him at his word. We'll find out in the press conference what exactly was discussed. But that has folks in Kyiv very nervous, you know, what will be covered in this thing. And there is the possibility, one cannot rule it out, that they could end up with a ceasefire with the lines frozen. I'm not particularly optimistic that that's going to happen today, but they've been in there for 2.5 hours, and they've obviously been talking about something. So we'll see what comes out of this. By the way, I should mention, I think what might be happening here, and I may be wrong, but I think what might be happening here is they're going to do a quick press conference, just some quick words before they go to lunch. I think that's what they're setting up.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but that's kind of what it looks like, is they're getting ready to do, you know, something to say, hey, things are very good, you know, we're making progress, whatever it is they're going to say, and then they're going to go to lunch. And they wouldn't do that unless they were making progress. So that, you know, I'm gonna look at this and be hopeful that they have some real progress to report.
Okay. Yeah, because you could look at it the other way. I mean, couldn't you? You noted it, that if they came out early, that may not have been a good sign. You were saying it could possibly be a good sign, and then the parties will go to lunch here. So it looks like a lot is happening. Jackie Heinrich says this happened very fast. Press here for Trump, Putin joint presser. We're told to get into their seats quickly, and that it could begin as soon as 10 minutes from now. Wow. Saying this is earlier than expected. Both podiums are still set up. So, Hal, just to give people kind of the time frame here, if it does happen within 10 minutes, that would be almost about an hour and a half earlier and then scheduled. And so it seems like things are very, very fast moving there in Anchorage, Alaska, keeping the live shot up for all of our viewers who are extremely interested in this. Hal, I'm going to reiterate the point. You and I have discussed it so often. Back in March in Saudi Arabia, the Ukrainian side did agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. All throughout these negotiations, Putin and the Russian side has never agreed to a ceasefire in any of these talks here. Trump wants to see progress on a ceasefire. Do you think that is attainable and achievable?
I think it is attainable. I think it's achievable. What I would say is you got to look at the ground, what's happening right now in Ukraine. The Russians pushed forward up around in the Donbass region. They made a penetration. They found some weakness in the Ukrainian lines, and they made about a 10-kilometer, basically a 10-kilometer push right to the lines. Now, most of those forces are getting wrapped up. They didn't have enough forces there to hold that. But if they were to freeze the lines, potentially that could stop the Ukrainians wrapping up those forward elements, and they could actually hold that ground. And so there might be a little incentive for Putin, and this is very tactical, some would say operational, to actually freeze the lines now so that they can consolidate on those gains without the Ukrainians counterattacking and pushing them back. That's something going into this. Of course, the other side, too, is you may have seen last night that Ukraine did a pretty massive drone assault across Russia, and I think they were making a statement there. But then again, the Russians have been doing these massive drone and missile assaults on Ukraine constantly. So there may be some reasons why Russia, from an operational, from a tactical standpoint, may actually agree to that ceasefire. And of course, you know, look, he was greeted warmly. He was given the red carpet treatment. And he's on a world stage, so there's a lot of reasons why he might do that.
Some breaking news here. Joey Garrison at USA Today, who covers the White House, says the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska has now ended after nearly 3 hours. So 3 hours time, nearly. It has now ended. Not entirely sure about the delegation lunch, whether or not that's happened or whether or not it will take place. Just don't know. But we are hearing that this press conference is going to happen literally at any moment. And so we know how Trump does in these situations, in these settings. He is very comfortable. He's very adept and agile at taking questions from reporters. What about Putin?
Putin looked really uncomfortable. When he was getting off the plane, reporters were shouting questions to him. And he was kind of doing the dismissive sort of thing, but I could tell he looked very uncomfortable with that. Is that something he doesn't get in Russia? You know, when he has a press conference in Russia, let's just say that he doesn't get all these very frank and upfront questions that kind of push him. I'm going to go so far as to say Russian media is a little bit controlled, if you know what I mean. So that's something that's unusual, and I'm kind of curious how they're going to roll this out. Are they going to let the press really go after Putin and ask some of the same questions they were asking on the tarmac? I would love to see that. I would love to see him have to answer those questions about the ceasefire, about, you know, the 30,000 Ukrainian children. I would love to see him have to answer that. I don't know if they're going to allow that to happen. By the way, just a quick metric. This meeting lasted 3 hours. You may recall they had a meeting with the Ukrainians and the Russians in Turkey. It lasted 40 minutes. So by that metric, this meeting's got much better than the meeting that they had with the Ukrainians. Not that Putin was there for that one, but, you know, 3 hours, that's probably about right. We'll see what comes out of this. And then we'll also see if they have lunch. Again, I kind of go back to another metric. As you may recall, that blow-up early on with President Zelensky in the Oval Office, it was supposed to be followed by a lunch. Well, that lunch didn't happen. So let's see if this lunch actually happens.
So maybe our viewers don't know this. You know this. Putin is notorious for keeping world leaders waiting. Did that happen today?
I didn't sense that. Okay. There was a little bit of discussion. No world leader wants to be the first one standing at the end of the red carpet waiting for the other world leader. Okay, and there did seem to be a little bit of a standoff going on, which was who was going to leave the plane first with that red carpet thing. And I think they kind of worked it out. It looked like it was a pretty natural thing where they both stepped out of the planes around the same time and met. But there was a little discussion, which is there a little gamesmanship going on here with the red carpet thing? And because, as you pointed out, Putin is famous for doing things like that. But I got to hand it to President Trump. Whatever was happening there, I'm sure there was some communication which made it very clear that that was not going to be acceptable if Putin was going to hold off and do something like that. Now, I'm kind of curious if there's something going on with the press conference where they're holding off. But I would point out this whole thing, this summit, everything has happened really fast. Light speed in terms of diplomatic time. Setting up something of this scope within a week. That's a lot of moving parts. There's so much behind the scenes that most people do not see to set something like this up, and it's being done on a military base, which is very unusual for a summit to happen on a military base like this, and in Alaska, which is very unusual for a summit to happen in Alaska. So there's a lot of things going on simultaneously here. So if this press conference looks like it's a little rushed or whatever, I would say everything with this summit seems a little bit rushed, and so I do think that they're kind of playing it by ear and just trying to adjust with whatever the two leaders are saying.
You know, Hal, this is more of a 30,000-foot view question. I like those questions. Does Russia want to get back into the fold of the West? And will they after this? What will our relationship vis-a-vis Russia be after this?
You know, that actually is an outstanding question, and this is where you find a difference in the philosophical outlook or the strategic outlook. President Trump is a businessman. He sees, when he looks at things like sanctions, business opportunity, economic terms along that way, he puts tremendous value and credit in that. Putin, on the other hand, is not a businessman. Oh, he's made a lot of money through corruption, graft, whatever you want to say, but he's not a businessman. And so when he looks at these things, he doesn't see economic opportunities in the same way that President Trump does. And so when President Trump says, hey, you could come back into the global fold, you could, or if he does say that, he'd say you could come back into, you know, the global economy if you would do some things and quit being essentially, so many words, my words, a pariah country, a pariah nation, that there's this opportunity there. I don't know if that resonates with Putin. I'm absolutely sure it does not resonate with Putin the same way that something like that would resonate with President Trump.
All right, we're nearing the bottom of the hour, and so the press was called in very quickly to the room there. As we were learning, it's now been confirmed the meeting's over, lasting nearly 3 hours. So now we wait for President Trump and Vladimir Putin to take the podium, address the press. You do see what looks and appears to be some from the Russian delegation in the front row there. I'm not entirely sure who they are, but you have more and more people entering the room. So, Hal Kempfer on with me. What is this going to be like? What are they going to say off the top? How much are we going to get a picture inside the conversation, Hal?
Well, my sense is, because this is in the U.S., more likely than not, President Trump will kick it off. And he just kind of does that naturally. That's just what he does. And I have a sense that President Trump, you know, he'll speak to the press corps. He'll have his comments, and then at some point they'll turn it over to Putin to say his comments. My guess, I could be wrong, but my guess will be that Putin will use a translator. He'll probably speak in Russian, and he'll have a translator there. And that's a wise thing to do. You know, if you're a world leader, you want to be careful. And we've all heard world leaders that say something when they're trying to speak English, and they say something, maybe a colloquialism or something, and they get it wrong. And then that's the story of the next day. So he'll want to make sure he gets it right. So I imagine he'll be using a translator, and then he'll be using the translator for taking questions. And it's not that he doesn't understand what the reporters are saying. However, he is a human intelligence officer, all right? He is a counterintelligence officer. This is, you know, manipulating people, getting them to do things that they don't want to do, whatever, you know, recruiting people, getting them to betray their countries. That's what he did for a living. And he's actually very good at a lot of things. I mean, he went from that to, you know, basically becoming the head of Russia. So he's got some tremendous skills in that regard. Well, using a translator allows you some time to think about how you want to formulate a response to a question. And then he can reply in Russia. And so you got a little bit of time lag going there. Gives him more time to think. He can say something in Russian, and then it has to get translated over in English to the reporters. All of that kind of delays some of that singe factor with some of the questions that could be asked. So that's what I'm kind of anticipating, is he's kind of sort of it's not a big orchestration, it's a very common tactic, but he'll be kind of orchestrating that to make sure that if there is a really tough question asked, that he will have some way of delaying that, getting to him, and then coming back in such a way that a lot of the edge, if you will be taken off of it.
So, Hal, I have to ask this. Who's a better read of people? Trump or Putin? You mentioned Putin's background as a KGB officer. Trump touts that he's a good read on people he comes into contact with. Condoleezza Rice was saying a couple of days ago, you know, Putin has more to lose here. that Putin is more reliant on Trump in this situation rather than the other way around, Trump vis-a-vis Putin. Do you agree with that assessment?
You know, what's interesting, President Trump, different background, you know, and frankly, we saw him reading people for years on television. And so he's got some pretty good skills in terms of reading people. But you know, Putin, everyone who's dealt with Putin, certainly anybody from the intelligence world that's had any dealings with Putin, say that he is always working the room. He is always gauging people. He is always, you know, manipulating, if you will, but he is constantly assessing, figuring out what he wants to do. And they say to watch him work a room is to watch somebody who, you know, very calm external demeanor, but you can tell their brain is just roaring 1,000 miles an hour to figure out how he can get exactly what he wants. And that's some of his tradecraft, if you will, in avoiding saying something that would offend somebody or would cause problems, but at the same time to avoid committing to something that he doesn't want to commit. And I'm going to be listening to that very closely with his responses to see exactly what type of language he uses, and if he's using some of that delaying tactic stuff as opposed to addressing, you know, the main issues at hand.
Yeah, I would imagine there's going to be some type of interplay between the two on the stage there. The psychology of all of this is quite fascinating. How back to the war, though? You have told me time and time again, Putin has no interest in ending this war. Mm-hmm. Will Trump have to convince him to end the war, that it's in Putin's interest to end the war? Do you think he'll try to do that?
The only way he could really do that is, and I do believe the threat of secondary sanctions does weigh heavily on him. His economy is not doing well. His economy is transitioned over to a war economy. He's basically drawn down on their sovereign wealth fund in order to pay for that. The other part of it's being paid for with oil and gas revenues. That's oil exports that goes to countries like India and China. Now, you've seen what President Trump, what the U.S. has done with tariffs on India. A lot of that is aimed at telling India, hey, quit funding the war, Russia's war against Ukraine. We haven't done quite the same. I mean, we have pretty substantial tariffs, I should say, with China. But part of that is due to the fact that we're in the middle of some very significant trade negotiations with China. So I don't think they wanted to throw a proverbial wrench into those negotiations at this point.
So Hal,
but those tariffs are significant.
So Hal, I'm sorry to be pessimistic on this question on sanctions and crippling the Russian economy. We would have seen that over the last 3.5 years. I mean, they have weathered that in some respect.
You know, they've weathered. I got to say this: they have adapted very quickly to a lot of different sanctions. Okay. And I'm not saying they wouldn't try to adapt to these sanctions as well. In fact, what I would assume is if we were to put these draconian sanctions in place on China and India, that they would find some creative way to circumvent that, to have oil get essentially laundered, if you will, around the world so it could get to them. It would be very difficult to do in the short term. In the long term, I think they could do some, but it would be a lot tougher than getting the oil direct. And in the meantime, Russia would be experiencing a significant loss of revenue that could go into the war effort. So what that, long story short, if we were to impose those sanctions, say today, it would be a very tough fall for Russia from a lot of different ways. The other thing too, which is kind of hanging out there and has been addressed this week several times, is the prospect of liquidating those frozen Russian assets. That $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. $230 billion of that is actually held by European countries. They could liquidate that without the U.S. if they wanted to. The U.S. holds about $26 billion. You may recall that there was a co-sponsor bill with Senator Murkowski from Alaska, where she actually had built into an $54 billion aid program or bill for Ukraine. That 26 of that was going to come from liquidating the assets, those Russian assets the U.S. holds. So that's another thing that President Trump could talk about. If Ukraine was able to get, say, 80 billion or 100 billion or something a year from those frozen assets, then Putin would be looking at diminished oil revenue, a sovereign wealth fund disappearing, and Ukraine having a lot of money to buy arms, ammunition, everything, those things put together, that could have a substantial impact on Putin and what his thinking is.
All right. Meredith McGraw at the Wall Street Journal has some reporting of who's in the room, saying press was quickly moved into the auditorium. Some of President Trump's senior aides are seated for the press conference, including Stephen Chung, Natalie Harp, Dick Luna, Margot Martin, Will Sharp, and James Blair. On the Russian side, she sees Kirill Dmitriev. Hal, what do we know about him? He's been somewhat front and center during some of these talks over the last 6 months. Dmitriev, what's his role in all of this?
Well, he's been, yeah, as you said, he's been front and center with the talks. He's been in the middle of this whole thing all the way around. That he's sitting there waiting for the press conference tells me, and I'm not, it was 3-on-3. I don't know if there was 3 in the room itself. I don't know if they had anybody at the back seats, shall we say. He would be someone I would expect to have in the back seats, or somebody who would be standing by if there was a question that came up during the discussions. The fact that he's actually out there in the press conference room waiting for these remarks tells me whatever role he was playing in the background, he doesn't have to play anymore. That they have worked out whatever they're going to work out for this particular session, this particular meeting, this particular summit, and that his expertise is not needed or his role, interlocutor role, is not needed for anything else that's being done. So I find that kind of interesting that he's out there. The fact that he's out there standing by tells me they've kind of wrapped up whatever the meeting is here. We're just literally waiting for President Trump and Putin to come out and say whatever it is they're going to say.
Hal, I've asked you so many times, and for viewers who don't know, you have been with us since the very start of this war. You were on with us the night of the very invasion in February of 2022. I always ask you, when will Putin budge and how will Putin budge? Up until now, he has expressed no desire to end this war, nor have the people around him. So what gives? What will be any, concession that he may make? The president was saying he would accept some form of a ceasefire after the talks are all said and done. What does that mean?
What's kind of interesting with Putin, if I could address that first part, is I honestly, and I remember vividly what happened in 1991. That was a big year for me. I mean, first off, we had a little thing called Desert Storm you may have heard of. I spent some time over there, came back, and I remember this rapid change of events. 89 through 91 was just an amazing, for a Cold Warrior, it was just an amazing shift in how fast countries and leaders disappeared on the scene. And he lived through that. He saw, that's why he's no longer a KGB officer per se, is because part of that was the KGB went away and it became reformed with the FSB. But nonetheless, that was a rapid change. And of course, what he's probably more concerned about is whatever comes from this war is what happens on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg. There is that saying, and I know I've said it before, that dictators, and I'm going to call Putin a dictator, dictators always look like they're never going to be displaced until the last 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden everything disappears. He knows that dynamic. He knows Russian history. He knows what's happened in Russian history, that if the system that props him up, that keeps his regime in power, falls, it will fall very quickly. So what that means, bringing it back a little bit, is that President Trump has to say things, not directly saying you're going to be overthrown or something like that, but has to say things that Putin understands could create a situation where the Russian people have just had enough. And I think that's what would scare Putin. That would get Putin to budge, if you will, is if he was seriously concerned that the dynamics were in play that could threaten his survival, if you will, which could be physical survival too, but threaten his survival as being the head of state of Russia.
Do you think there's just like a human element to this? Putin is 72 years old. He knows he's not going to live forever. Maybe he doesn't know that. The long term of all of this, we always say Putin plays the long game. Mm-hmm. That at some certain point, it will have to end or morph into something else.
You think that. I don't know if, sometimes I wonder if some world leaders think that they're going to live forever. And we've certainly seen a number of very famous world leaders literally die in office. You know, they never think they're going to leave. He may think, you know, at some point here I'm going to have to leave, but he looks around. He says, but that point is not today. It could be 3 years from now, 6 years from now, 9 years from now, whatever. So I don't think he's planning his immediately vacating that office by any stretch. I think he thinks he's going to be there for a while. I do think that he thinks he can right now he thinks that Russia can outlast the resolve of the West. And he has a view of the West that others have had too. Saddam Hussein had this view, others that, you know, more famously Osama bin Laden had this view that the United States or the West, that we are paper tigers. What they see, what these authoritarian regimes see, is the messy dynamic of democracy, which they hate, and they see that as weakness. And historically, they've always seen democracies as weak, that they go in there with determination, with control, and they break the democracies. And I just think that's a fallacy that they have. I think democracies are actually far more resilient than authoritarian countries. I think that give and take dynamic is what makes us, when we turn hard. And I've seen this, I certainly saw it on 9/11. You know, I saw it with Desert Storm. There was a resolve that I'm sure Saddam Hussein never dreamed would ever happen. And when the U.S. makes a determination we're going to do something, we do something, and it usually catches these guys off guard.
Yeah, you know, you had indicated to me earlier in the week that, and because some of the critics of this entire meeting have said it's a propaganda victory for Putin, but you acknowledged that that was going to happen either way, depending on how the meeting went. And we're getting some reporting on how the meeting went from the Russian side, according to Fox's Brett Baer, that it has gone somewhat well, paraphrasing. And so we'll just have to wait and see officially in front of the cameras if that holds up here. But to that question that I just posed.
Rephrase that if you would. I would like, because I was listening to the Brett Baer thing. I'm sorry.
Right. I was echoing some of the comments of the reporting from Brett Baer, signaling from the Russian side, his sources saying that the meeting has gone well. But I was asking about the propaganda victory that some of the critics of the very meeting itself have said Putin will get no matter what. You acknowledge that too. But you said that's beside the point at this point.
I think it really is beside the point. You know, look, if let's look at it this way. You know, where to hold the meeting.
Okay, Hal, sorry, just to interrupt here. We just saw Steve Witkoff enter the room.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we just had U.S. Special Envoy Witkoff enter the room there. So things could be moving along quite rapidly. We'll get back to that question. It's an important question. Let's listen in, actually, to the sound in the room briefly. You see there some of the American reporters doing their stand-ups. You see there Caitlin Collins with CNN, Peter Alexander with NBC, and Hal Kemper still with me. So, had to note that for the viewers, Hal. Steve Witkoff now in the room. You also see some of the Russian delegation in the front row on the left-hand side as well. But we wait for the principals, obviously, to get into the room. Haven't seen them yet. Once we do, everyone will be watching this press conference live in its entirety. We'll see how many questions each of these leaders takes. But Hal, Putin does have quite the coterie of Russian press traveling with him, does he not?
He does, and I fully expected something like that. You know, and to go back to your previous question, you know, this is a propaganda win. There's no two ways about it. Just to have this meeting is a propaganda win. My understanding, what kind of has been seeping out of Washington, D.C. on this is that President Trump did not really want to go back to the Middle East again. You know, he'd had that really big trip back there, and so going to the UAE or Doha for something like this wasn't that great. And the problem that Putin had, of course, is that he's got a international criminal court warrant, so there's not that many places he can actually go. So they brought him over here. But to have him come to the U.S., which you get into the dynamics of where do you hold this thing? Wherever he went, it was going to be some sort of propaganda victory. And I don't think you can have a meeting with President Trump and Putin without Putin, considering his pariah status on the international stage, without that being a some sort of propaganda victory for Russia. On the other hand, if they had not done all these things, like the red carpet, the driving together, all these things, that's to build rapport. That's to try and work through some of those issues. That's to build an assessment of where they were going to go with this. And obviously, President Trump was saying he'd know within the first couple of minutes if this was going to go bad. Well, by the time that first couple of minutes was over, they were done with the ride in the car. So we would have known right away that would have been an issue. So I think, yeah, propaganda thing. But the other thing is they're trying to get Putin to do something he doesn't want to do. I don't think he really wants to end the war right now. And they're trying to constellate everything to somehow build in his mind that, that this is the time. This is when you have to do something.
We just have a different vantage point there, trying to recognize some of these White House staffers. Looks like a little sharp there in the front row. So Hal, interesting to note, on the way to Anchorage, Trump was on the phone with the leader of Belarus, Lukashenko. Now, why would he have done that?
That actually caught me by surprise. I tell you, I'm trying to think the last president that talked to Lukashenko. It's just not somebody you talk to. Of course, he is kind of a proxy, if you will. He runs Belarus, but he's a dictator, and he basically is only in power because Russia backs him. And Russia's made it pretty clear that they're going to basically absorb Belarus at some point. So that's the bargain that's been made with that. But I think the reason he called him was he was trying to assess things, and he probably felt that Lukashenko may have a better feel for what's going on, because Lukashenko is actually one of the few world leaders that actually meets with Putin. I don't know about a regular basis, but they do meet more frequently than he meets with anybody else, And I got to tell you this, the other one he talked to would be, Xi in China. I think that would not work out too well. And then, of course, Kim Jong-un, I think that would be a complete waste of time to talk to Kim Jong-un about anything. But talking to Lukashenko, he might be able to give him some sort of assessment as to what was going on. And I think, President Trump likes to, as he said, this is a kind of an interesting term, a feel-out session. And so he was trying to feel out things before he actually landed in Alaska.
What about our European allies? There's some reporting out there to suggest President Trump may be on the phone with them and the Ukrainian side as we speak. We'll wait for more confirmation on that. I would imagine they're going to be watching this live, but they will be getting their own readouts.
Mm-hmm. I think they will. And actually, that is a very good sign. The fact that he's on the phone with our European allies. I would imagine the big three he's talking to, would obviously be, Starmer, Macron, Merkel over in Germany, and then, of course, President Zelensky. But there might be some sort of breakthrough here. There might be something substantial. We're going to know soon enough if there is. But the fact that he's on the phone with them, I'm going to stay hopeful, and I'm hoping he's sharing with them something that was very positive that came out of the meeting.
Now, if there is a breakthrough, the question is, will Ukraine accept that? All right, we do have the photographers getting ready. Okay, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, now in the room here.
Good.
Okay, so he was obviously one of the three in the Russian delegation. So you see there more of the delegation coming into the front row here. Let's take this full head on. You see James Blair, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, White House Chief of Staff. All right, so it does look like they are readying this press conference. You also see Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on hand, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, also Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and let's see, I'm trying to recognize Caroline Leavitt there, the White House Press Secretary. So all parties from the U.S. side, Hal, are now in the room, except, of course, the principal himself, President Trump. So we wait for Trump and Putin. It looks like this is happening imminently here. Hal Kemper, stay on the line. We're chatting with you on the very back end. Once the press conference wraps, we thank you so much. Andrew Kraft back here in the anchor chair as we are watching now for President Trump, for Vladimir Putin to begin their joint press conference in Anchorage, Alaska. This is almost happening. The moment we've been waiting for. Obviously, the moment you see there. Okay, Secretary of State Rubio, Steve Witkoff. Remember, they were in the room with President Trump. It was 3-on-3. We know it lasted nearly 3 hours. You see there, Secretary of State Rubio, kind of hamming it up for the cameras. And so now we wait for President Trump, Vladimir Putin. This is happening imminently at any moment. Let's listen in. Okay, so this is, like I said, it's happening at any moment, where we will let you watch uninterrupted the entire press conference there in Anchorage, Alaska. Remember, this all came together in a 1 week's time. We brought you the news 1 week ago today, last Friday, that this was happening. Now today, this Friday. So somewhat hastily arranged. But to Hal Kemper's point, is there a breakthrough? That is the question. What has been agreed upon, if anything? And if anything, will the Ukrainians agree to that? Remember, they're the other party in this war. Though they may not be there in person right now, they will be getting a readout. The fate of their country hangs in the balance as they continue to face Russian attacks and Russian aggression here. So those 2 words there, smack dab in the middle, pursuing peace, only 2 words, a simple statement. Not all that easy, as so many who have tried.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America and the President of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We had very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor. Very good to see you. In good health and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that There have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we're prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there was a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope that we'll succeed in that, in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. And I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin.
Cancun approach Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Kilo is type Beechcraft King Air 12 miles northwest of Mike India Mike 2,500 feet.
Interfered with by the Russia hoax. It made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have done with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened.
Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
We had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon, and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, wow. So this is what we just watched there, statements from Trump and Putin. Putin speaking first. No questions taken by reporters gathered there in the summit venue in Anchorage. So this was not expected in any joint press conference setting. You anticipate, you expect the principals, the leaders on hand will take questions from the press. They did not just do that here. President Trump saying that the meetings were productive, some things were agreed to. but not the thing they came for. Putin saying that the conversations were productive here. So in the meantime, we do have to get into more of these conversations here because this is quite something. Let's go back out live to our vantage point there.
Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo is 17 miles northwest 2,500 feet with uniform to land.
Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo Cancun Tower. Altimeter 29.921 golf, fly straight in runway 12 left.
Fly straight in runway 12 left Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
Altimeter 29.9, call cleared for DME Yankee runway 12 left approach. Cleared for DME Yankee runway 12 left approach, Rappler 404.
Runway 12 left, Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo, contact ground on 121.0. Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo, acknowledge last transmission.
121.0 Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo. Goodbye.
Rappler 404.
Ground Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo, taxi to parking.
Beechcraft Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Kilo, taxi to general aviation parking using taxiway Bravo Charlie Delta Alpha.
Taxiing to general aviation parking via taxiway Bravo Charlie Delta Alpha Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.